Hello everyone, we're Jack and Jackie from the Mindful Homestead.
We live here in the beautiful Monadnock region of southwestern New Hampshire. We're on approximately 10.5 acres of land that we bought as a home first and homestead second. This was something that was on our mind when we purchased the property, but we weren't necessarily planning on becoming full-on homesteaders and growing all of our food. Over the last couple of years, with a lot of the situations we've seen take place with global supply chains and things like that, we've really decided that we wanted to put a bigger emphasis on knowing where our food comes from. And then a couple years ago, when we found out we were having Emma, we decided that we wanted to grow as much food on our own property as we could. We ran into a little bit of an issue there. The problem being that we didn't purchase 10 acres of perfect pasture land. The land that we purchased was heavily wooded. It's a lot of softwoods, it's a lot of hardwoods, there's a couple different stands. And while it was great for deer hunting, it wasn't necessarily the land that you would have chosen if you wanted to start a homestead because it had a lack of pasture. That meant no cows, no sheep. Maybe we could have had goats, but we'd be running them in the woods. It wouldn't necessarily be on open grass where they could browse. So it presented a few problems. That meant we had to get a little bit creative about how we were going to do things. Not having pasture and all of a sudden wanting to grow animals for food, it gets really tricky. Now, Jackie's a therapist by trade, and one of the tools that she uses is mindfulness in working with her clients. Tell me if I'm saying anything stupid or that you don't want me to put in a video. Since I'm married to her, I typically see a lot of spillover, and I'm probably her most full-time client. With that comes a lot of knowledge of the things that she talks about in her therapy sessions. Using those concepts of mindfulness, we were able to develop a permaculture plan that allowed us to continually improve our land and grow food for ourselves while we're doing that. However, since I'm not the therapist, I'm going to let Jackie explain a little bit about mindfulness and how it applies in a homesteading setting and how you can use it too to figure out what design works best for your homestead.
So what is mindfulness? Mindfulness is intentionally being aware to the present moment. It's being an observer of your environment. I often like to say, are you mindful? Are you aware? Are you observant? Or are you mindful? Like F-U-L-L. Your mind is full of what are you having for dinner tonight? What do you have to do tomorrow? What time do you have to pick up the kids? So mindfulness really fits into the homesteading world by getting you to slow down and intentionally look at your property, what your goals are for your homestead. We've used mindfulness pretty successfully in our homestead by really taking a look at what we had available to us and then also understanding what's going to grow in our zone and the climate that we have. So mindfulness was a huge component to building our homestead because the property that we bought, although it's 10 acres and it's beautiful, it really wasn't the perfect piece of property that you would have looked for when buying a property specifically for homesteading. It's pretty well, covered with forest and not a lot of pasture. So that meant that we really weren't looking at animals that were going to need pasture, and we really had to tailor what we were going to bring onto our homestead based on what we had. So when we decided to get into homesteading, the first animal we brought onto our property were chickens. Like most homesteaders, they're probably your easiest to get into. And they do help you augment your land to what you need it to be. However, the larger animal we brought onto the farm that was really meant to purposely help us create our homestead into more of what we wanted were pigs. So we brought on 3 pigs and we forest pastured them to help clear out land under all of the trees to be, whether it's pasture or more usable land.
We're back here in the area where we ran the pigs last year. What you're looking at right here is a quick clip of what the land looked like before we ran the pigs here in this section of woods. Most of what you're looking at right now was densely brushed. It was super heavy, and by running the pigs back here, we were able to clear this space out and create an environment where not only can we reclaim this land and use it for whatever we wanted, whether it was pasture or, eventually to take these trees down and get to the timber more readily. But the big thing was we created a naturally cleared out wooded area where if we want to plant other trees in here, such as apple trees or chestnut trees, we can do that. There's a little bit of a patch right here where there's actually tomato plants growing, and that's from at the tail end of the season. We had a bunch of extra tomatoes and green tomatoes from the garden that we couldn't eat or just weren't going to get to, or they had fallen off, and we threw them to the pigs to let them eat it, and lo and behold, the pigs pooped them out, and we have tomato plants growing back here. In this area where we ran the pigs last year, there are also a bunch of beech and oak trees, which in the Northeast are a prime source of mast in the woods for species like deer and raccoons and chipmunks and virtually any animal that lives in the woods up here in the Northeast. They're able to take advantage of that source of food in the fall time. What's nice about this, and where mindfulness plays into it, is that because we knew that those species of trees were present in this stand, we were able to put the pigs in here, and they were able to use a natural food source to supplement what we were feeding them. The area we had them in was not big enough to run them 100% on that food source. However, it did provide a natural alternative to the food that we were putting out. We reduced our grain costs a little bit. If we weren't mindful of knowing that they were here, we would have never been able to take advantage of that. Not only that is something good to think about from a permaculture standpoint and designing your homestead around the natural resources that are available, the other nice part of it is that you're being a lot more self-reliant and self-sufficient. Part of everyone out there who's trying to build a homestead is you want to step away from being reliant on others and needing things from the grocery store or the feed store, things like that. By relying on this food source, we were able to not have as big of a commitment. If we really needed to, even, we could have made the pigs area much larger. If we were looking primarily from a survival standpoint and needing strictly to put food in the freezer, there's plenty of mast out on our land for the pigs to be able to survive. So here we are standing in the blazing sun outside this year's pig enclosure, or the first of it. We're doing a few different rotations with this year's pigs. We've got 6 of them this year as opposed to last year's 3. And right now we're using them to clear out this space behind me, which used to all be wild low bush blueberry. We waited to put them in here until the blueberries were out, and there were tons of blueberries on the bushes, which were great because as soon as we turned the pigs loose into it, they annihilated them and really had a feast of blueberries. The benefit to doing it this way is after the pigs have cleared this out, we can come through next year and we can plant commercial varieties of blueberry in there that are going to give us more food than the low bush blueberries that were there originally. While wild blueberries are great and taste awesome, there's tons of them on our property, and in reality, because of how hard they are to harvest, it's not necessarily the best thing for us. So it's a win-win situation from a permaculture standpoint. The pigs get to eat the blueberries that are in here, we get to eat the bacon, and then we get to plant more blueberries in here that provide us a better level of food than what was here originally. This ties in a lot to the idea of having a food forest, which is not necessarily something that we're doing right here, but let me take you down to where we are planning to do a little bit of a food forest on the property.
I'm currently standing in the area that we are going to be putting our meat chickens this year. So we chose to put our meat chickens here this year because our long-term plan for this area is to create it into a food forest. So with having the chickens here this year, it will provide a lot of wonderful fertilization to this area of the lawn. And then in future years, we'll start to plant different types of trees that will then provide us and our animals with food. The reason why we've chosen to eventually do chestnut trees specifically is because they can produce per tree 150 pounds of chestnuts, which are then edible for not only our family, but also our livestock, specifically our pigs.
The coolest thing about planting a food forest is that not only are we going to be feeding our animals from it, but the animals that we feed, we're actually using to clear the land. The chickens that we're running in this area this fall are going to fertilize the food forest area in preparation for planting next year. And then the area that I showed you that we have this year's pigs on, next year we're going to run our chickens in there. Chickens are really good at scratching up the surface. They keep any new growth from coming up too far, and they're actually really good at flattening things out too. The pigs are coming in and they're rooting, and it's going to be really lumpy, but then the chickens will come in and their lighter duty scratching, if you will make it a little bit flatter so that we can go in and put a cover crop down and eventually decide what we want to do with that. For now, because of how wooded we are, we did have to build raised beds out back, and that's where we're raising a lot of our veggies. For us, we're not at a point yet where we can really have the raging garden that we'd like, just because we don't have the space for it. The stand of trees that you see behind me is eventually going to get cleared out. One day we're going to run pigs in that, possibly even next year's batch, and we'll be able to get in there with a chainsaw afterwards, really clear that out, and I'd like to just have a huge garden that runs essentially all the way down our driveway. Look at that beard glow with the sun behind me. The biggest thing you can take away from this video, if you only pull a little bit from it, is that this sort of thing is going to look different for everybody out there, whether you're homesteading on 1 acre in the city or whether you're homesteading on a 120 acre ranch out in the middle of the western part of the United States. We sat back and we used the concept of mindfulness to take a good look at what we were able to do and how we could efficiently change our land while still producing food for ourselves. Whether you're working in the garden and keeping an eye on things and looking out for possibly a new pest or new signs of a problem that you might have there, whether it's fungus or bugs or whatever, or if you're just keeping an eye on your animals and you're making sure that, hey, something's not looking right, you know, that animal's acting fishy. These are all concepts of mindfulness, and just as they can be applied to your standard homesteading setup when you already have animals or you already have a garden planted, you can take those same concepts and apply them to the design of a permaculture setup for you. Look to see what's available, look to see what's already growing on your property and what plants will do well in conjunction with those plants. And if you need to augment your property or you need to change things up, think about what you can do, what animals would work well in helping you get to that change. It's all mindfulness, but it all comes down to just being aware of what's going on and using it to your advantage. Thanks for watching this video, and thanks to Jim and Jess for having us. We really had a good time putting this video together and sharing with you how the concepts of mindfulness that we use to build our homestead could also apply to you on yours. If you want to see more of what we got going on the homestead, just look up our channel. It's called The Mindful Homestead. You can head over to mindfulhomestead.com and find us on all your other social media outlets out there. Thanks for watching, everybody, and have a great day. Bye.